Hello.
I'm Matt. This is Taylor. We're sales engineers here at Prefect, and we're going to be giving a little bit of a background on everything that's going on today. We'll wait a couple minutes for some viewers to get in. But yeah, Taylor, you want to just start off telling me a little bit about kind of your title, what you do here at Prefect, and then as people get in, we'll start going through some of the ECS tasks and what we'll be going over today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm a sales engineer, like Matt was saying. And so essentially, what Matt and I do is we make sure we understand as much as we can about Prefect and how it works and how it's used, and keep the community updated when there are new features, or when we can jump into to bring helpful tutorials like this one for ECS.
Sweet. So you want to give me just a little bit of background on ECS and kind of what we're going to be going through here today? I know it's a popular option that a lot of our users end up going with as they're looking to expand into the cloud. What's kind of a background on why they choose to do that, and like what are some of the benefits of hosting agent and hosting with ECS?
Yes, absolutely. So ECS is, we have to first say, like, this is an AWS thing. So if you are someone or an organization that is using AWS as your cloud provider, you can think of ECS as a really strong option for Prefect flow execution. It's probably one of the most popular options for anyone who's using AWS and wants to execute their flows in AWS. We'll go through some in this tutorial. Basically, guys, we're going to go through a basic overview of ECS concepts and how they're going to translate to Prefect concepts. We'll also do a beginner guide to using a Terraform module to set all of this up. I'm actually pretty new to Terraform and even AWS myself. Like, I'm definitely not an expert. So I wanted to kind of just share with you all what I've learned. For anyone who's at my level and it just wants a brief introduction to ECS and Prefect and how those will work together, this should serve that purpose. So we'll go through sort of using the Terraform module to set up an ECS cluster, to set up a Prefect agent, and then also use that information to create an ECS task block. So that's a Prefect block, Prefect infrastructure block. And that infrastructure block will allow us to execute a flow in ECS. So that will be like the scope of this tutorial.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that little bit of background. So I'm sure as most of you know, ECS is that elastic container service. So as you guys are looking to host with containers, and want to have that all in the cloud, it's going to be a really popular option. So thanks for giving that little bit of background on kind of how we'll go today. And yeah, excited to hop into it, Taylor.
Awesome. All right, well, I can share my screen. Also, if anyone wants to throw questions in the chat or let us know where you're from, we like to not feel like we're just speaking to empty screens. So like, feel free to jump in at any time. We'd be happy to answer questions. So let me share my screen. Share screen. All right, there we go. I think I got it.
Perfect. Looks like we can show that on the stream there, and that should be looking good on my end.
Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at, we're going to kind of be going through a series of different pages today, but I wanted to start with a quick overview of Prefect's hybrid model. This is not a beginner overview of Prefect, but I just want to remind us all of sort of like how the agent is able to spin up infrastructure, and this will help us understand like what's happening in ECS. So this is Prefect's hybrid model. Essentially, what we mean when we say a hybrid model for execution is that the Orion API, or Prefect's orchestration API, is going to be doing a lot of orchestration work using only metadata. And then the actual execution of your code, i.e. like the execution of your flows, that's going to be happening in your cloud infrastructure, right? And this hybrid model is facilitated through a Prefect agent that's going to be able to bridge that gap and do the communication of metadata, right? So you will set up a Prefect agent with this, which is essentially this lightweight, long-running Python process, and that agent's just going to be continuously pulling Prefect Cloud, asking if there's any work to be done. What the agent really does is less so like, it's not, you don't want to think about the agent as like executing the flows. It's more like the agent will set up the infrastructure, and that is how the flows will get executed, right? So in this case, what we're going to be doing is we are going to set up an ECS cluster where we will set up a long-running agent process, and that agent is going to kick off ECS tasks for the purposes of those flow executions. And that's essentially what we're going to do. So just wanted to make sure we were all kind of got a refresher on the hybrid model there. And now we can jump into an overview of ECS. So this should be very, very quick. Like I have 2 slides. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with a few terms. The first thing I want to make sure we are all aware of is that ECS tasks do not equal prefect tasks. You will hear me throughout this tutorial, you will hear me saying task a lot, and I am not talking about prefect tasks. So prefect tasks are sort of the smaller unit of computation that you're going to put inside of a prefect flow. That is different from an ECS task. An ECS task is going to allow you to launch containers and launch containers like in an ECS cluster. So really ECS is going to be sort of a cluster of tasks. And when I say tasks throughout this tutorial, just assume I'm talking about ECS tasks, not prefect tasks. Capacity providers, this is an important concept to think about when we're getting into ECS. So what ECS is essentially, you can think of it as like a cluster of, a way that you can orchestrate a cluster of containers. A lot of people will think of Kubernetes as the right way to orchestrate container, right? It's the container orchestrator. ECS is a great option for any teams that aren't Kubernetes experts, but still want to have a managed containerized execution of their flows or really of any containers. So that's why it's really popular, because a lot of our users maybe aren't Kubernetes experts, but they still want to execute their flows in containers, and they still want to make sure those containers are being managed so that if there is changes to capacity or the load, the ECS will be able to kind of accommodate those shifts in ways that like a regular virtual machine won't be able to. As you'll have more orchestration options when you're using ECS than when you're just using virtual machines. However, it's essentially ECS is this abstraction layer that's over some kind of server, right, at the end of the day. And you really have 2 options of thinking about the server when you're setting up ECS. You can either say, okay, my cluster is going to be hosted on a series of EC2 virtual machines, or you can say my ECS cluster is going to be just hosted using AWS Fargate, which is essentially kind of abstracting away thinking about any virtual machines. And you can kind of just let AWS set that up for you on an as needed basis, kind of in a serverless fashion, right? So we are going to be focusing on Fargate, and that's also because this tutorial or this recipe that we're basing this talk on is using AWS Fargate. I'll also take a moment to introduce the tutorial that I'm actually talking about. So this is the tutorial that I'm talking about. It is a recipe that we have in our Prefect recipes repo. And if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat the link, I don't know if you're able to do that, but thank you.
I just shared it in the link. This is one of the recipes that we just pushed today. So super new and exciting updates to it by Emil, one of our solution architects on the team.
So thanks to Emil, even though I'm not very familiar with Terraform, I'm able to sort of use this module that he's built to get started really quickly in ECS. So we're going to kind of be walking you through how you would use this. I would definitely recommend checking out the README. There's going to be a lot more detailed information in the documentation here, but hopefully I can just help you guys get started. So that's this is going to be the module we're working with today. We'll go back to our concepts here. So now I think you guys understand capacity providers. Another concept that I just want to just be on the same page with you all is on task definitions. So task definitions, they're the blueprint that's going to kind of tell ECS, hey, this is the Docker container that I want to be launched, and like this is what I want to have happen in that container, right? So it is like it can often be, you'll often see it represented in JSON, and that task definition is kind of like the blueprint building block behind all pieces of your cluster, really, in ECS. So whether you are setting up an ECS service or an ECS task, there's going to be a task definition behind both of those. So the task definition is really like, they are, you can think of just like a flow. You have your flow, and then you have different flow runs, and those are different instances of your flow. I like to think of it similarly in like you have a task definition, and you can either run that task as a task or run it as a service, right? Either task execution or service execution. So there are, when you're going to be defining the task definition, that is using the same word twice, but when you're going to be sort of building a task definition, you'll have to think through sort of how much CPU do I want to the container to have access to? How much memory do I want it to have access to? Maybe what are the environment variables? What are commands that are going to be running? There's a lot of different parameters that you'll be thinking through, but luckily like a lot of the work will have been done for you. So we'll be able to predefine a lot of those definitions using either the recipe or using Prefect's infrastructure block. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I didn't explain what services or tasks really are in the context of Prefect. So you can think of, like I said, ECS is really, you're going to start by getting started with an ECS cluster and basically saying like, here's my Prefect cluster, right? And inside of a cluster, you can have one of two things. You can either have containers that are running as services or containers that are running as tasks, right? And the big difference between these is, I'm really simplifying things, but ultimately a task is going to be launched and then will run until it's done running, and then it will stop or exit, right? Whereas a service is a task definition that's just going to be continuously running. And if maybe my EC2 instance goes down and I have another one being, like I get another one brought up, like ECS will restart that container because it's a service and it's ECS knows it's supposed to be continuously running. So the way that we can think of this in terms of Prefect is that an ECS service is perfect for the Prefect agent, and ECS task executions are perfect for your flow runs. So the first thing that you guys have to do if you want to set up Prefect in ECS is first set up your cluster. The Terraform module will do this. And the next thing you'll want to do is build task definitions for both of these pieces. So the task definition for the agent is probably what you're going to want to do first, right? That is also going to be part of that Terraform module. So you should be able to just put in your values and get this defined for you. And in fact, like the Terraform module will really take care of this entire piece here. It's going to build the task definition and start that ECS service. So you'll have the agent running and ready to go. And that agent, once it's created, is going to make sure that a work queue is created on the other side of things. So this, you can think of this as, you know, the local cloud, or not local, but this is the cloud infrastructure. And then the work queue will be created in Prefect Cloud. And when it comes to a task definition for your flow runs, you can use the Prefect's ECS Task Block and give us parameters. And in fact, we can define that task for you. So using the Terraform module and using Prefect's ECS Task Block, you can abstract away a lot of the heavy lifting that might be involved in getting something like this started. So are there any questions? I don't know if there's anyone in the chat, but if there are any questions before we kind of get into more of a demo, let me know.
I don't see any questions right now. I think we can definitely get into some of the demo, and I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into like the recipe and the Terraform you're talking about.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's hop into it. I'll shift my screen over a little bit here. But it's really, there's not much going on here since we're really, oh, one thing I wanted to note. Like I said, I'm new to Terraform, and I did not add the appropriate files to my Git Ignore. And that was, luckily I did not push, but like you want to be careful with that stuff. So I've included this resource. I don't know if I can send this in the chat, but I would highly recommend just double checking that you've got your Git Ignore configured properly for Terraform work. And then this is the prefect recipe. So in this prefect recipe, essentially what you're going to be able to do is, sorry, I do not want to look at Git. Also, my building is doing testing of alarms. So I'm going to mute really quick. It's not an emergency, I promise.
So this looks like a little bit of, the Terraform main module here as Taylor's getting into it and finishing up with that fire alarm. So as you guys can see, oh, there he goes. Looks like
I'm back. It's like I said, it's just going to be tiny little beeps all the time is what the maintenance person told me. Okay, so essentially, you're going to just tell Terraform the provider, right? This is my understanding. Like I said, I'm a beginner here. You're going to specify this provider, and then you can simply pull in a module by referencing the Git, like that URL, right? So here you'll have all of this sort of laid out for you in the documentation, and then you're going to provide the module with parameters, right? So like a lot's going to be happening behind the scenes when you init and run this, but you need to give it information such as like, what's the API key? What do you want to name the agent, etc. And so that will be set up by configuring a variables.tf file, which I have here. And this is actually going to be pulling values from a tf-vars file. And that is where I put any sensitive information, right? And again, Git Ignore. Down here, this is where you're going to kind of put everything together. You're going to say, hey, I want to use this module, and this is the data, and these are the values that I'll be putting in. And then you'll be able to do like a Terraform init, and then a Terraform plan, and just read this and make sure that everything looks like expected. And then you'll be able to do a Terraform apply. And it's crazy how easy all of this is. You'll essentially, we have no changes because I've already done this, but this will build a cluster for you in Amazon in your ECS. So here you can see in my clusters, I have this one. Here is where I specified the name of this cluster. So here we can see my services. So here I have an agent service that's already been set up. And I can actually take a look at the logs. If we look at all of them, we can see that these are logs that you would normally see if you start an agent in your terminal, right? So this agent is living here in this service. And now it's time to get some flows running because the agent is healthy. The agent is an ECS. We want to get some flows running in the form of ECS tasks. So one thing you'll notice is that we have this awesome ECS Task Block. So all of our different blocks are here. I'm sure, anyone who's used Prefect has gotten familiar with a few of these types. We have these special blocks called infrastructure blocks. And whenever I was pointing to the agent over here and I said, the agent's main job is spinning up infrastructure, the agent uses information from an infrastructure block to spin up the infrastructure according to what you specified in that block. So we've got blocks like Docker container blocks. We have the Google Cloud Run block, which might be similar to, if you're using GCP and you kind of want to get something similar to ECS execution, we recommend using the Google Cloud Run job block. But for now, today, we are going to be using the ECS Task Block, which
we also have integrations to be able to work with Azure as well. Prefect is super cloud agnostic. We have, whatever you're working with today, this is going to be ECS, but we do have, the ability to work with Azure, GCP as well. Correct, Taylor?
Absolutely. Great call out. Thank you. And so here's our ECS task block. And you can see I'm going to give that block a name. So I can say maybe like my Snowflake infra block, right? And this could be, you can think of maybe having, you could have, a handful of different ECS task blocks if you want to have a variety of different configuration setups. So what information are you going to put in here? You will say, okay, how much CPU do you want to provide to the ECS task, right? Do you want any environment variables to be present? Do you want this, any particular image to be used, right? The default will be to just pull the Prefect HQ Docker image, right? Memory that you would like to allocate. What's the cluster name, right? Whether this would be Fargate or EC2, right? Like we talked about those capacity providers. And so you'll fill in all of this information. I've created a version of this because, of course, Prefect is very code-friendly, code-first tool. So anything that you can put into a form in the UI like this, you're going to also be able to define it in Python. So that's what I've done over here, just to show you what it, really, there's so many defaults. You don't have to fill out all that information, but just this information, Prefect will use these inputs along with defaults to construct a task definition for you. And that is what will be used whenever you're kicking off flow runs. I've hard-coded these values in, but you'll notice that this Terraform module has outputs. So this basically means that once Terraform builds all of, this cluster and the agent and the service, et cetera, you'll have these output values in the state information. And you can use those values to programmatically build your ECS task blocks. So this can be just something that really is very, very code first. You're going to spin it up using Terraform. Those values will go into your Python file. You will save that ECS task block, and that is what's going to be used whenever you kick off your flows. So what I've done is I've defined these values here. Like I said, I've hard-coded them in this case. And I can just go into here. We can go into utilities, or not actually in utilities. It's actually in Terraform. I put it all in one place. So and then cd into ECS agent. So I can just run this Python file, and this will create a block in the UI that I can then see. So we can say Python ECS task or ECS block, and that's going to save this. Ooh, oh, I've already built one. So I have to say overwrite equals true. There we go. Always have to have certain errors when you're live coding. Okay, and so now this is essentially how I'm going to get that information to Prefect Cloud. It's aware of all of this metadata that's going to need to spin up the, or just to spin up the ECS task. And I'm going to apply, you can see here in the blocks, we have it here, right? And so I'm going to apply this to a flow by building a deployment. And I have a deployment that I've saved here. So I'm going to make sure I'm at the top of my repo. Alrighty, we're at the top of the repo, and I'll be able to say, okay, Prefect deployment build. So let's walk through that step by step. You can also define a deployment by writing it in Python, but we definitely recommend the command line because that will make it easier for you to sort of put this into a CI/CD system. So you're going to say Prefect deployment build. You're going to point to the flow, right? And then you're going to pass the infrastructure block. So you're saying, all right, here is my ECS task, Taylor IB 117, right? So that's the infrastructure block that we want to use. And so I can create maybe 10, 20, 30 flows and have them all use the same infrastructure block, as long as, those parameters will work for all 30 flows. So this is where you might want to have more than one ECS task block. You might want to have one that has more memory for the more intensive flows. You might want to have an ECS task block with different dependencies that are available in a different image, So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of configure it, but you should be able to build several ECS tasks that can be used on a wide variety of flows and kind of allow you to build your flows without having to think too much about your infrastructure. So here's where I'm going to specify that ECS task block. And then I'm just going to tell Prefect, hey, my code's in GitHub at this reference. I'm going to name my deployment. And then here is where I'm going to pass that work queue, which that work queue is speaking to the agent that lives in ECS, right? So we can build that deployment. And once I've built that deployment, I'll be able to see, okay, the queue that's going to be listening and running this flow is the ECS agent test 117. So let's go to our work queues, take a look. We've got here, it's a healthy, looks like it's healthy, right? So we know that there's that heartbeat going. And now we can run the flow by going to that deployment. So I just built this deployment called test 117. We can hop in there and we can do a run, do a quick run, and then we'll be able to see it and it will be pending. And we can even take a look at the logs. So if something goes wrong, you can look there, refresh. Oh goodness, really hope this works. Well, in theory, then this would execute, right? And then this would run. ECS agent, let me just make sure I've double checked everything. We have the ECS agent test. Yeah.
I know we're coming up on time at the end of this and have a couple minutes left. So it looks like, because we had just set this up this morning, I know we're live coding this too. So there are always issues that we run into. But what would you say, like, as, users come in when they're starting with this, because we have just both started this on, our own learning side. When people come in and see, maybe things are going in that pending state, where would you recommend a lot of the times they look for, or what are some like pitfalls that you kind of saw as you were first creating these ECS tasks?
So yeah, when you're, oh my God, did it work? Yes. Oh, thank God, guys. Okay, sorry. That makes me feel so much better. Okay, it worked, guys. We're good. So essentially, yes, there were a few pitfalls that I was running into. And of course, like I leaned a lot on my team to help me figure things out. I think a lot when you're working with any cloud product, you're going to be thinking a lot about permissions. And, usually you're not the person that set the AWS instance up. So, I'm trying to figure out, what are the roles that I can use? What are the permissions that I can use? What are the subnets, or, what region is this going to be in? So all of those considerations were things that I kind of had to ping a lot of people on my team and figure out what was the right way to think about that, and what was the right thing to be using, even security groups, et cetera. I think there was definitely a security group issue that I had where the flow information, the state information just wasn't getting sent to Prefect Cloud. And my colleague George was like, well, if it's just like a timeout, you probably know it's a networking issue, right? So just dealing with those permissioning and networking issues, I would say you want to keep in mind that there are two different types of roles or permissions with ECS. You've got the task execution role, and then you also have the task execution role and the task execution role and
just the task role?
No, the task role and the execution role. Is it both?
Yeah, task role and execution role.
Yeah. So there's one that yes. So just keeping in mind those different, I think I learned that, had to figure it out, and then probably just forgot about it. But I would have to revisit that at a certain point if I needed to dive back in. So just keeping in mind that you have those different roles, but a lot of that is explained and handled in the Terraform module, which again, just makes our life easier and allows people like me who are not experts at any of this stuff to get these things set up. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. And
yeah, thanks Taylor for giving us that background on everything and
yeah,
going through
absolutely.
ECS. That recipe for everyone is in this chat right now. It's also on the Prefect recipes repo. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to message us on the Slack community. Hope you guys are in there. And thank you all for coming to our little demo on Prefect ECS today. Anything else you want to add, Tate?
Yes, one more thing. So this was very beginner friendly. If you want to have a bit more concise of a tutorial that gets a bit more high, is a bit more advanced, I would definitely recommend Anna Geller's. Is there a place where I can send Anna Geller's blogs on ECS, and she also has a YouTube video on it, will really help, for anyone that knows, that already has this background that I've kind of presented on. I recommend that they go straight to Anna Geller's tutorials. So can I send something? I don't know, add banner. Let's see. Well, I don't think anyone can. There we go. There's a link. So if anyone wants to check it out, I would say you probably, if you're involved in the community, you know Anna Geller, but I would definitely recommend anything she's written on ECS is going to be very helpful, particularly when it comes to like thinking about best practices, thinking about the right project structures, thinking about the right CI/CD for a system like this. Check out her stuff. And yeah, that's the last thing I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Great being at Prefect Live, and we'll see you all next time. Talk to you in the community. Have a good one.
Bye.